Yeah, thank you very much, Satchalila. Yeah, lovely. We kind of share a love of myth and ritual and magic, don't we? Yeah, and along with lots of other people on these screens, actually, um, it's uh, it's a joy to be talking about ritual along with so many of the people whom I've shared rituals so frequently, so often over the years. I've got Janaka at the bottom of the screen, some of my most treasured memories of puja in the Buddhist Centre were the nights when Janaka used to lead the Friday night pujas. Oh, I love those. And I love it. Yes, I do love it. And I'm going to be talking about why, I suppose. But also talking about, why so many of us have a sort of an adverse reaction, especially when we come to it for the first time. So I'm not so much preaching to the converted, as it were, but sort of addressing this to people who maybe have, a question. Why is it important? So if, like many of us, you've experienced a bit of a jolt when you first encountered ritual in Buddhism, then this is to try to explain a bit why it is a part of Buddhist practice and why it's important. And to reassure that lots and lots and lots of us do experience resistance on our first encounter with ritual. Not all. Some people take to it like ducks to water and start prostrating themselves all over the room. But not many, I don't think. Most of us will have had a bit of a sort of a, whoa, what's this about? In fact, some people are even surprised to discover that ritual is a part of, Buddhist practice as practiced in the West. I mean, and for many of us, even the very words, ritual or devotion or devotional practices trigger a kind of a deep reaction, often a recoil. And I would ask you just at this moment to sort of cast your mind back, perhaps, to the first time you took part in any kind of ritualistic activity at the Buddhist Centre, mantra or saluting the shrine, or possibly a puja, a sevenfold puja, and just shut your eyes for 2 secs, because we're going to sort of take this into the conversations later, and take yourself back to what your first reactions were. I'm just going to be quiet just for a moment, just feel into where you were with it. Try and get a body sense of what went on for you at that moment. Okay, so just keep that around for later. And I know for myself, I was, I seem to remember feeling pretty frozen, certainly embarrassed and self-conscious to sort of get up and go and sort of put myself down in front of a shrine. Although it's so long ago now, I've largely forgotten. So I'm going to suggest that most of us, it'll be a sort of a continuum for most of us. I mean, some of us will have responded with a lot of skepticism, possibly even dismissive, maybe even angry, right at one end of the scale. And then that goes right through to perhaps quite a neutral response, maybe a little interest, right through to intrigued. I'm going to go along with this sort of passively and take part in it, right through to the top, emotionally, really engaged with it, maybe even blown away, I think, some people for the first time, but not many. I think most of us Westerners at the beginning experience a kind of a don't get it thing. I know when we taught a course on ritual and devotion last year, Pranyamati, myself, Satchalila, Lots of people will say, I don't get it. It doesn't work for me. I can't sort of connect with it. Hear it very, very often. And I'm going to just sort of digress here. I've been very struck over the years at how many people don't even get up and try it. I understand why. I think there are things like self-consciousness, embarrassment, somebody looking at me, I might fall over, have I got jam on the back of my jeans, that sort of thing. But why not try? I was thinking it's a bit like, I'm staying with my grandson at the moment, and we habitually sort of give him food that maybe he hasn't seen for the first time, and he'll just sort of say, I don't like that. And you'll say, well, how do you know if you haven't tried it? You just sort of get this blank look. And when I said that to him today, I thought, oh crikey, it's the same thing, isn't it? Well, what is it that stops us even trying? Why do we decide we don't like something before we don't try it? Anyway, that's by way of a little sort of digression. Now, go back again to your responses when you first engaged with ritual, and particularly for those of us who had any kind of negative reaction, ranging from outright rejection through to embarrassment. I'm going to suggest some reasons why that happens for us, because I think it might be helpful for us to try to understand what it is about ourselves that maybe triggers resistance. So even though ritual's been a part of human life for millennia and worldwide, not just in India, you think of the Incas, the Egyptians, the Chinese, the Aboriginals, Stonehenge. The list is endless, really. In our modern Western scientific materialistic world, I think we have just about managed to strip it out pretty much completely. It's gone through so many years of change, of transmutation, but at this stage in our existence, devotional ritual as such isn't widely practiced, is it? Interestingly, when we look, historically at the North American Indians, say, with their totem poles, or the Aboriginals with their ancestor worship, we don't look at them and think stupid. We don't think they were stupid people. In fact, I'd suggest that we're actually rather fascinated by just how much historic peoples were in connection with their basic instincts, with their love of nature and their connections with the rhythms of nature. I think we're rather fascinated and rather admiring. But so much happened. And these days, I think, we don't think they were stupid, but I do think that many of us think, oh, I know better. I know better than to indulge in that nonsense. We're creatures now of logic and rationalism and knowledge in the sense of sort of scientific knowledge. And these things, reign supreme, or have reigned supreme in the 20th century, post-industrial. The other thing is that over the centuries, ritual and devotional practices moved away from being directed to the natural rhythms of nature, to the seasons, the tides, the phases of the sun and the moon and so forth, and became very mixed up into formal religious practices. And various gods and deities kind of replaced the moon and the mountains. And then with the demise of popular religion, mainly in the West, and with the rise, as I said, of science and materialism, so came the demise of ritual. And the result is that very few of us modern Westerners would have wanted to kneel at altars, entreating, strange gods to forgive us or explain things. But I would suggest that ritual in our lives hasn't disappeared at all. Actually, it's been sublimated in many, many other ways. And I think that this is because the desire in us, in human beings, to reverence something, to venerate, to touch into wonder, is our birthright. If we don't worship gods anymore, then we'll be worshipping money or beauty or physical fitness or material success or whatever else we substitute. So ritual has gone elsewhere, but our lives, I'd suggest, are absolutely laced through with it. For example, in sport, you know, the ritualistic behaviours in football or rugby. My first visit to the Cardiff rugby stadium, whatever it's called, I was just astonished. There were dragons, there was fire, there was chanting, there was singing, everybody had daffodils on their head. I mean, ritual and very set patterns of behaviour as well. Stunningly ritualistic. Think about the Olympic Games and all the ritual associated with that. So sport is one of our new gods, isn't it? Ritual's present in civic life. It's present in many, many ceremonies that we
We're just losing you there, Suryadaya.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe you want to go back just a minute from where you were.
Because?
You froze.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Where did I get to?
You got past the stadium.
Okay. Then I mentioned civic life. I was mentioning marriages, funerals, graduations and things like that. But then I got onto the very important subject of our entertainment. Okay. Am I moving?
Great. Yes. You are.
And this is this huge area where we've kind of put it all. If you think about movies, about literature, about theatre, they're absolutely stuffed right, left and centre with myth, magic and ritual. Think about His Dark Materials, you know, that series. Think about Harry Potter. Think about what else? Oh, Lord of the Rings, The Matrix, Star Wars, Game of Thrones. All of them. I mean, the qualities, the characteristics of ritual are rife in all of them. And we have a deep, innate response to them, I think. So I think there's something to think about where we put it. So going back then to some of the rituals in our everyday lives, you know, things like, say, for example, funerals are particularly strong and interesting one at the moment. There is no rational reason for ritual. If somebody we love dies, why is it that we don't just say our goodbyes, put them in a box, move on, and that's it? But we don't, do we? I mean, a funeral is just a classic. We need so much more. We need a vehicle, a set of procedures and a context to enable us to express our grief. And I don't think any of us before have seen the profound effect that not being able to attend funerals has had on people around the world, friends and families. And even I think we would acknowledge that stories of people, there was a terrible case, wasn't there, of a young boy who died quite early in the COVID crisis, and his family were unable to be with him, and only a very few were able to attend his funeral. And I mean, I remember having quite a visceral response to that myself, the sort of the deep sadness of that lack of ability to express something so important. Because that's what ritual does. It enables us to come into connection with our very deepest experiences. And at this point, I think I'll chime in and say that they are not necessarily sad. Of course, ritual can be incredibly joyful and light. You know, when we talk about the range of human emotion, the depth of human experiences, it's both sides. It's dukkha, but it's also joy and deep, deep, deep pleasure and happiness. So, going back again to the first time you sat, I asked you to think about how you'd responded when you first indulged in ritual. Same thing, but this time, go back to the first time you sat beside the shrine, say at the Bristol Buddhist Centre or wherever it was that you first came, and somebody lowered the lights and lit the candles and some incense. I wonder if you can remember that, or one of those first few occasions. And again, just shut your eyes, take yourself back to that situation and have a feel around what your responses to that were. Some of you will have been on the introductory course, which Advaya Mati and myself and Badra just led. And I think it was on that course, on one of the evenings, when Advaya Mati, with his usual, masterful way of teaching meditation, the first thing he did was to actually lower the lights right down, light the candles, and I think he did light some incense. And so many people commented and said how much more relaxed and deeper their meditation had been that evening. I was quite struck by it. You may have been there. And similarly, we're talking now about something we recreate in the Buddhist Center, but think now about how you feel when you're outside in nature. For example, when you look at the moon, or when you sit beside a fire, or stand beside a bonfire, or when you watch the waves, or a river flowing in sunlight, or when you first set eyes on a great mountain. I mean, what happens to us? I would suggest that when we come into contact, with the rhythms of nature and with the great beauty of nature's, and when we're touched by things like starlight and moonlight and firelight, then we come into touch immediately with a sense of wonder at the great sort of mystery of things. And in those situations, many of us will also experience a great sense of longing, of wanting to be in touch with that. And it's that we're trying to tap into when we create ritual. And there, with actions of our body and speech and mind, and this is where it comes into this path of transformation. We're talking about action, and this is very much about action. It is not about thought. We're trying to touch into our depths and to stir and recreate our instinctive responses to nature and beauty. We're getting out of our rational, busy, logical, endlessly chattering mind that is constantly going in search of explanation. And we're allowing ourselves to just step into the deeper mystery of being human and being prepared to not go searching irritably after explanation and fact. Just lean into something that is not scientifically or rationally explicable. And I think what we're saying when we recreate these conditions in our Buddhist context together is, let's create an image of our greatest needs or our greatest heart wish. That is through sounds, through smells, through sights, an image of something that we really, really yearn for. And this might be love, it might be wisdom, it might be beauty, or radiance, or divinity. Let's create this image, and then let's surround it with candles and burn incense, and let's say verses, and venerate in order to open our hearts, to get our busy heads out of the way. So when we offer ourselves at the shrine, it is these things that we are venerating, not strange gods who are going to save us, not other beings as such. We're looking at our own potential and we're creating ways of expressing it. And I'd sort of kind of conclude by reminding us that as children, you know, if you look at small children, the children just have this innate loving openness, draw towards these things, a fascination and a marvel with myth and magic and wonder. And children have the ability to be completely transfixed and excited. We had that when we were children. If I watch my little grandson Leo, as I was yesterday, copying down and discovering a pair of butterflies in the grass, total and complete concentration and utter delight, just observing these two natural beings tucked away in the grass. And I suppose that's one of the joys about being a parent or a grandparent. You re-experience these things through your kids and your grandchildren. And my sense of longing when I watch Leo, you know, if I push him out in his pushchair and he sees the moon, he'll go, moon, you know, moon, and shriek with delight. And I have that similar response. It sort of resonates with me. It's a recognition thing. And then I think, oh, it's been beaten out of us, you know, it's just been beaten out of us by logic and by being entreated by our society to sort of smack it aside, and even to make the mistake of thinking that it's foolish and childish, but it's not. So that's what we're trying to do in a Buddhist context. That's what we try to do in the Buddhist Centre. That's what we will be trying to do this week. Is we're kind of sort of faking it till you make it. We're recreating. It's a sort of pretend, but it's in order to engage all these qualities of ours, as I explained, and trigger that connection. And it can be enormous fun. I've been in rituals full of bubbles and incredible dancing and not misbehavior, but we mustn't forget that ritual can be very, very light. And when it's well led, it can either be deeply profound and bring us into touch with those aspects of ourselves that we need to feel, can be quite the other end of the spectrum and enable us to feel incredible joy. And if we commit ourselves, if we don't do what the baby said and said, I don't like that, I haven't tried it, if we try it, then who knows what we might all discover. So for those of us who haven't tried it, that would be my watchword at the end, try it and see. Okay, so I think that's all I need to say. And I think I had a little message to say that the magician has put us in groups. Naravira? Muted.
We're all ready to go into groups, Suryadaya, yes. Thank you.
Okay. You know, explore this as you will, and but those two questions that I asked you, perhaps as a way in, if it doesn't flow immediately, what was your first response to ritual? What was that about, and how have you been since? Have you still got qualms, reservations? And similarly, what was your response to sitting by that candlelit shrine? Can you see the difference and also the connection? Okay. Okay, thank you.